Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to another episode. And it is time for the 2025 Sub All-Stars. It's an annual tradition around here. It is our seventh. I can't believe it. I cannot believe this is the seventh annual Sub All-Star team. And, we finally found someone this week. The big news of the week, Cody, we finally found someone who was higher on Anthony Davis than I am.
What do you mean? What happened?
You know what happened. Don't be coy. Don't be coy. Today's show, if you haven't heard in the past, the idea is that we are picking the next set of players after All-Stars. So we have this business where we have to run through the All-Stars really quickly. Some of them will be on the line and we'll say, I don't know, I'll throw my hands up in the air and I'll say, which way is the wind blowing? How do I feel this player could be an All-Star? Because, of course, we think about player value in ranges around here. Your circumstance matters, your teammates matter, your coaches matter, and that means that it's tough to really pinpoint exactly where you are, no matter how much film and how much data we get on you. So we'll talk about those borderline guys, then we'll fill out the rest of the Sub All-Star team. These are players that are sort of in the next tier of players, if you will, that don't get acknowledged by just the limited, simple-minded thinking of only choosing an All-Star team. So that roughly takes us out to 50 players usually, and then we get to the cutoff guys there, and it's impossible, and then Cody and I just pull our hair out for the entire show, and that's pretty much how today is going to go for the next hour and change, depending on how fast we speak. Cody, what do you think? You have anything else to add?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at my list right now, and I just earmarked like 59 guys personally for me to talk about. But the issue is like where I stopped was more or less, I just had to stop. It's like writing. Like the rule of writing is that you're never done writing. Right? You're either writing or it's published or you're editing or something like that. And I could have played around with this list forever. I probably could have expanded it out to 75 or 80 because the margins get so slim when you get to like the 50s and 60s and whatever else. So I just kind of had to start. So stop, I should say. I'm expecting at some point for either you or I to bring up someone that the other person didn't really intend to talk about. And I think those make some fun conversations. But Ben, last week when we talked about OKC, you said that we had some uncomfortable things to say during that episode.
Yeah.
I think that there's a couple more deeply more uncomfortable conversations to have today. And it's going to
deeply more uncomfortable. Is that why you're in a t-shirt? Is it warm there? Is it balmy? Is that a t-shirt? Is that what you're wearing?
Well, here's the thing today, because it's like we have our like snow days dance at the end of the week. So it was PJ day. So I was wearing a robe over this plain white tee. And then I just took the robe off. I could have recorded in the robe, but that would have been strange. So I'm just going to rock the plain white tee today.
No, you 100% should have recorded in some sort of judge's robe today. That would have been fantastic and quite fitting. Okay, last year, I'm sure there's more to the preamble that I need to say. Criteria, we're not choosing guys for just based on how they've played in the first 50 games. We're saying if we started today and there was a playoff tournament for the next 2 months and we had a team, who are we picking? That's the idea. I'm sure there's more I need to say, but I'm just too excited this year. Yeah. Yes.
Can I preamble one thing? And I don't want to preamble too much because we've got a lot to talk about here, but I do think that there's an aspect of us rolling in what we've seen of players in the past, because I think there are some guys that are maybe underperforming, let's say at like the all-star level during the actual season, but they might end up at a sub or all-star level just because we're like, you know what? We've seen this in the past. We know at this level. We know that there's some weird circumstances going here. So we're going to kind of gift them a little bit here. And I think there's going to be a little bit of that chicanery going on between us.
Well, we always have to balance that. I mean, this has come up since like the first time I did this team. And I think in 2018 or 19, whenever that was, people, this is really funny to say now. People were like, Draymond Green, he's old and washed up. And Chris Paul was the other one. And everyone was like, he's terrible. He's old and washed up. And I either had, depending on the year, depending on the player, some conversations back doing the sub all-star team solo before it was you and me, like saying, hey, Draymond Green and Chris Paul, when the playoffs get here, are still going to be really good. They're either all-stars or sub all-stars. But I think this season, more than any I can remember, and I'm teasing a little bit, and we should jump in. This season, some of the old guys I'm not that certain about. I'm like, I don't know if I can gift you that anymore because I don't really entirely know what's going on. So without further ado, I think last year we started with the big people. I propose we start with the small people
Ooh.
this season. Would you like to? We break it up into bigs, wings, and smalls. Would you like to start with the smalls for the 2025 Sub All Stars?
Absolutely. Let's go for it. Like you said, we started with, I think, the bigs last year. So let's do littles to start.
Littles. I believe that's their official name, the Littles. Okay, so in the smalls for All Stars, let's just start with that. I have Shea Shea Gilgeous-Alexander
Yep.
from the Los Angeles Lakers, Luka Doncic, who
What?
yeah, no, I know it's a surprise. I know it's going to come as a surprise to some people in some front offices in some places. Luka Doncic, even though he's out of shape, and overweight, he's still an all-star in my book. How do you feel, Cody?
I was gonna say, how much are you docking him because he's not able to bust out like 15 pull-ups right now? Like at the end of the day, isn't that really what
15,
matters?
what about one?
It's just like the whole thing. We judged Kevin Durant on the fact that he couldn't bench 185 when he was 19, and clearly that analysis worked out. So I think going back to Shaq, like 2000, 2001, we should just judge players on how they physically look, either strength-wise or during the regular season, and that's it. There should be no other analysis. So I thank the Mavericks organization for opening our eyes to what the true analysis of basketball should be.
I've already lost track of my list. This is too good. Shea, Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, John Morant, Anthony Edwards, Stephen Curry, Devin Booker, Jalen Brunson from the New York Knicks, and there's more. God, there's a lot of good small players right
There
now.
are.
Yeah. Tyrese Maxey. Can we just pause and talk about Tyrese Maxey? Because for me, he was a slam dunk all-star. We can get into this thing where if you're actually picking the all-star team, people who pick, they say, well, I really need to reward the first 50. I still haven't fully figured this out, but they really need to reward the first 51 games, but not the ensuing games. And then if you have like a slump at the beginning, you can really get penalized depending on how bad you perceive the slump. So Maxey did not come out of the gates on fire this season, and I think a lot of that had to do what was going on in Philadelphia, Embiid's injury, in and out of the lineups, Paul George, and then the team just became a hospital mess. And now he's been playing with Ricky Council and people that some of us have never heard of, and someone who looks like Eric Gordon from the Chris Paul trade over a decade ago. And he's been tearing it up. He has been insanely impressive, especially recently as of recording this episode. I know these are supposed to be kind of like historic landmarks that you can go back and check in on what we were thinking in each season. But man, like Maxey's been unbelievable. Almost single-handedly took down the Celtics, almost single-handedly took down the Nuggets. So if I had a real-life all-star vote, he would have been an all-star, but he was a slam dunk for me, yeah.
I want to shout out that Nuggets game because I thought his overwhelming attack off the bounce was on full display. There's a point in the fourth quarter. It's near like 5 minutes and less at some point like that. He has three straight possessions where he just attacks the rim and scores. Right. And the first one I think was off the bounce. And one of them, which I think is really great about him, he's so good at coming off screens. He's so good at moving and attacking. One of them was a stampede where he catches and blends the catch into the dribble move. And when you get Maxey moving that quickly, there's basically no one that can stay in front of that. Then
he's
you get
a
fourth possession where he draws a foul. So it's basically 4 straight possessions where you're getting a scoring chance just based off his blurring speed and his ability to really finish with a nice little floater package. So I think it's I don't want to say it's Westbrook, but it's Westbrookian in the sense of like how overwhelming and constant you have to deal with like the paint attack from him.
Yeah, here it is. In the last month, Maxey averaging 30 points per 75, 4% true shooting better than the league. His team, this is what blows my mind, his team is outscoring the opponents when he's on the floor. They are +1 in Philadelphia when he's on the floor. In the last month, they are -16 when he goes to the bench because have you seen who plays for the Philadelphia 76ers? Guerschon Yabusele has been amazing, but he's not going to come up in the sub-all-star conversation today. Okay. Let's continue because there's more smalls. I didn't realize this. There's so many smalls. Darius Garland, I have as an all-star. And then we start to get to the area where I start to say, am I 100% confident that this player is an all-star? I don't know, but Kyrie Irving to me has played at an all-star level this season in Dallas. Don't forget, Kyrie Irving is he's gonna take the Mavs to the championship, running an offense through the Kyrie Irving offense. But he's still pretty good in all seriousness. And another one, Cody, that I think when I sized up the players, I think I still have on the all-star side of the line from your Milwaukee Bucks, Damian Lillard. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
I think that makes sense. I feel like the worst of Damian Lillard is when he falls into like his foul baiting shenanigans. And I think when that happens, you automatically want to bring him down a couple of notches. But I think what people lose sight of with Lillard is his passing ability. And I think you're starting to see a little bit more. Like, obviously, you're seeing a lot more chemistry between him and Giannis, but I think the passing between them, some of the pocket passes, the timing with the lobs. He threw a lob to Giannis the other day. Like, it was one of the highest almost finishes I've ever seen. Like, Giannis caught it left-handed, like above the square, missed the dunk. It was a really interesting comment. I mean, that's not what we're talking about at all here. But my point is Damian Lillard is a nice little passer along with his shooting ability.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna go. I think I might have one more all-star. We have to talk about this player. I think I might have one more all-star here. I kind of still feel like, despite the defensive deficiencies, which have improved over the years, still bleeding a lot of value on defense, but nothing like his first season or two. Trae Young is so good on offense. I kind of still feel like he's right at this level of potentially being an all-star player. So you can talk me into which way you think I should go here on Trae Young. He's had not the greatest shooting season for him, but again, in my head, I'm like, is Trae Young really a whatever percent? Is he really truly this level of shooter, or is he a slightly better shooter? He's just having a slump. His team's also going in different directions. And, you start to chip away at the team, and Jalen Johnson is out for the season and things like that. And you just don't expect that level of player. I feel like people have an expectation that Trae and some spare parts from the scrap heap will be able to win 40 games in the Eastern Conference or something. And that doesn't feel realistic for this level of player to me. That feels more realistic for like a top 5 player.
I have a hard time really like pinpointing how good Trae Young is because, you have the size thing, you have the finishing mishaps that can happen probably because of his size and lack of vertical athleticism. But you go back to the Heat series in the playoffs a couple of years ago, and you can see him being overwhelmed by like defenses really coming up on him and attacking him. But then you see in a later playoff series against the Celtics, really pushing them, like really bothering them with his ability to manipulate. One of the best manipulators in terms of passing we have in the league, with his scoring ability when he really catches fire. So you kind of have this weird up and down with the offense that makes it difficult to gauge. I mean, it's clear that Trae Young is a very good offense player, right? I don't know if you told me that he was around 10, maybe even a little bit higher, sure. But I think it would be difficult for me to fully pinpoint just how good he is. But I guess the issue is when I see how inefficient he is, especially in terms of like the fact that the scoring volume is down a little bit, it concerns me. I'm like, how much offense can you really provide just based off your passing ability when you're taking things away on defense as well? So I think this is a really, really, really close case for me, Ben.
Okay, let's talk about this because I think we're of a similar mindset, and we have to get in here for a second and explore this studio space. How much of that do you think is Trae evolving with the players around him? And kind of, we had these quotes over the summer, right? Of like, it turns out if I pass my teammates the ball, they can do cool things with it too. I think some of that is a little too hyperbolic because I think he knows that. But in the context of him playing this like super Helio style in the past, where he's responsible for setting up the best possession on every trip, setting up the best shot on every possession that they have for the team. Layups, lobs, kickouts, cutter passes, or I'm Trae and I'm going to get to my floater. I'm going to get all the way to the rim. I'm going to hit a pull-up 3. How much of that is shifting this season, and how much of that is the change in the rules and the physicality that has allowed these incredible perimeter players, one of them is on his own team, Dyson Daniels, to be more disruptive? You don't get as many easy free throws on these kinds of drives. If you're a smaller player, it just isn't as simple as it might have been a couple years ago. And I can't get out of my head that every time we talk about this, we say Trae Young is on an alternating all-star schedule. And he missed the All-Star in his rookie season, made it in his second, missed it in his third, made it in his fourth, missed it in his fifth, made it in his sixth, missed it in his seventh. That's this season. So is he going to be back on track next season? And has anyone ever done that? So you tell me. I could go either way. I don't entirely know how I feel about it.
So okay, I'm looking at some of the mega creators in the league right now. I feel like for my money, like what would you say? Would you say that Trae Young is a top 5 passer in the league right now? Like definitively, I would say Jokic and Luka of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah.
Who was recently just traded for Anthony Davis. I think those two are definitively better passers.
No. He was traded because he's not a max player. We have to, if we're going to compare Trae and Luka and these passers, we have to contextualize. Maybe Jokic is a max player. Maybe. Right?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Super max. Do you think Lucas is a max player?
I mean, I think if he gets on like an LA diet, like starts running on the beach, like maybe Rip Hamilton meets up with him out there. I don't even know if Rip Hamilton lives out there, but he seems like someone that's just always running on a beach somewhere. So if he gets on like the beach running Rip Hamilton thing, eating some avocado toast every day, that probably gives you more calories than you want. But I don't know. Maybe if he can get all that in line, I'd want to pay him a few bucks. But who knows? Maybe that's why I don't run teams, Ben.
You're really leaning into this. I think LeBron is probably there. I don't know how many more you could fit in the sort of like clearly a better passer than Trae Young right now.
So I think with his speed, his manipulation, his ability to like start and stop, it's really tough to stay in front of him. He can really unlock a lot for a team, especially for guys like Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu. Like these are guys that thrive off playing next to people like that. And even Jalen Johnson, who's great in terms of how he's developed as a creator, but he still thrives really well with playing with somebody like Trae Young. So I really don't know, Ben. I really don't know what to do with him.
Do you want to make
I should tell you on my list, maybe this is the first time that people are going to get angry. I couldn't quite click the all-star side of things. I couldn't quite do it.
Okay. Do you want me to make a decision now, or do you want to come back to it later?
Let's come back to Trae.
Okay.
We purpled them last year. He's a purple case.
This is a very strong purple. So that kind of that's maybe, let me see. There's a couple more purples I want to discuss.
Can I ask about 2 guys that you said? Just give me a quick elevator pitch for, why it was so easy for you. James Harden and Devin Booker. I was wondering if you had any hesitation with either of them.
Booker, I had more hesitation with Booker than Harden, I think. Harden has been sort of just like a lighter version of what he used to be. And it goes back to passing and playmaking and, controlling a team and an offense that is really built around defense. And we're saying, hey, we're going to have one of these teams that has a really, really good floor on its defense with these defensive oriented players. And then we're going to allow James Harden to basically give us enough offense when he's out on the court. They've been outscoring opponents by 4 points per game when he's on the floor. They have a 113 offensive rating, which is, slightly below league average, right around that. He has a nice synergy with Ivica Zubac because he's still one of the best pick and roll passers in the sport. And I think that's enough to get you on this side of the line. Yeah.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Yeah. Booker, I did have some pause, but I just feel like he's too good of a scorer overall. He's not losing enough value back, I think, with his playmaking and his defense, which are sort of weaknesses relative to his scoring and some of his scoring game and his shot making from the mid range. And of course, we've talked before about, does it feel like Devin Booker should be a 40% 3-point shooter? It does, but he's never really quite there. But I don't know. Booker's the one where I would be more open to you coming in with some counter case and kind of changing my mind a little bit. But I also feel like he's not in a great situation because the Suns roster is just a mess and it's perfect for shining a spotlight on his weaknesses and exposing them and being like, hey, can you be a playmaker and oh no, you can. Oh, okay. Well, then we're not. Can you defend and be versatile? No, you can't. Oh, then we're actually not very good in Phoenix.
I do feel like the last 20 games or so has looked better than the first chunk of the season. I thought Devin Booker has come on and looked a little bit more, what do I want to say, aggressive Like it felt like there wasn't quite as much as him looking for his shot and running the offense, kind of letting it flow into him. But now it feels like I'm seeing a little bit more Devin Booker. So I feel like after seeing this, I was like, all right, there's a new coach, there's a new system. The Suns are kind of strange. I'm just gonna gift it to them. I ended up gifting them both the All-Star berth, but I was interested about the edge case with those two.
Outside of Maxey, who we talked about him struggling to start the season, the other player with the sort of worst statistical profile of all the all-star guards we just went through is actually Anthony Edwards. Have you noticed that? His advanced numbers are not too hot if you look at things like estimated plus minus from dunks and threes or our box score model, or even just some of his, traditional like on-off numbers and things like that. I'm still comfortable with him there for all the things we've talked about with Anthony Edwards last year. I've never really been on the, top 10 next Michael Jordan or whatever, but I would be open to you also introducing him and trying to poke holes in sort of his flaws, but I think he's too good at the stuff he does still.
What we saw last year, especially when he was really hot in the playoffs starting that season, was to me clear all-star type of stuff. And this year he's like playing point guard next to a team where there's like, we talk about teams having like a threshold of shooting ability to make sure that they're like a functional offense in 2025, right? Like teams need to have this much spacing to be able to work. But I think the thing that people don't talk about is there's also a threshold for like being good passers on the team, being good connective tissue type of passers. And the Timberwolves don't have either of those. Along with that, they don't have like, Mike Conley has aged quite a bit over the last couple seasons. They don't have a functional point guard, and Anthony Edwards has to handle that a lot. He's so outside of what he should be in his role that I think it's taking away like quite a bit of juice of what we can actually see. So I'm sort of gifting him the bad situation season right now. And I'm more so looking back at Anthony Edwards and saying, like, actually, I believe that that's the real Anthony Edwards in a better situation.
I'm very comfortable saying he's been an all-star this year as well. I just think there's a distinction between like a top 10 or even top 15 level player with all the overall things that contribute to offensive pressure, basket pressure, playmaking, movement without the ball, IQ, screening, extra passing that you talked about, and then defense and team defense and focus and all those things. And so he's very comfortably an all-star to me this season. Can we go to the other purples?
Yeah. Okay. There's one name in particular I'm waiting for here.
Okay. So I have De'Aaron Fox as a purple. Yeah. How do you feel about him?
De'Aaron Fox of San Antonio, Ben.
Yeah, so yes, Victor Wembanyama's new point guard, De'Aaron Fox. Yes.
Do you want to talk about that fit for a second while we let's chat about this? Because
I think you can make the case, about sort of his strengths and weaknesses as a player based on what you're going to say about him being put in what I think is a better basketball situation for Fox than what he was in Sacramento.
I think if nothing else, like being able to play next to Wemby is definitely going to help his defense. I think Fox has okay defensive instincts. Like I don't think he's moving the needle too much on like the positive end, but I also don't think he's a negative on defense. Like he does stuff on defense, and I feel like his athleticism and his length and his size, he's a taller point guard than most of these other guys, lets him ramp up a little bit more. And if he has somebody like Wemby backing him up defensively, I think you might actually see him uptick a little bit defensively in that way. Now, the thing is Sabonis is really quite adept at running that DHO kind of passing game. And I think Fox was able to get downhill, and they had a really nice chemistry from the last few years of doing that. And I think him and Wembanyama are really going to need to develop something like that before we see a more fluid offense. I don't know. I like the fact that the Spurs now have like some functionally good players. I think Fox as a passer is not exactly like the type of point guard I would love to see next to Wembanyama. I'd love to see somebody, who's more of a like, I'm going to distribute the ball, I'm going to look for everyone else's shot sort of thing, the lob threat sort of thing. So I'm interested to see how that connects with him, but his scoring pressure, his blinding speed, his pull-up ability, things that we all saw working in the playoffs, it all makes me be like, yeah, I like the fit there. It's not a perfect fit, but I think it's a good enough fit. And I do know in terms of the all-star, sub-all-star thing, you and I have struggled basically every year knowing what side of the line to put him on. And yes. I think if I remember last year, did we end up with him on the all-star side of things?
I'm going to look that up right now. Yeah,
Okay.
we have access to the history of this. What is this player's name? De'Aaron Fox.
De'Aaron Fox, yeah.
Last year we had him as an all-star. The year before we had him as a sub all-star.
So that's exactly it. Like, I don't know how different he is from year to year. I always want the 3-point shot to be more dialed in. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I am going to go with. I mean, I'm feeling good today. Let's put Foxy on the all-star
Okay.
side of the line.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that for him.
My next purple is Cade Cunningham.
Ooh.
How do you feel about him?
I think I brought it up last time that I'm getting a little bit more Cade curious as I watch.
Yes,
He's developing.
Yes.
He's having a nice second side of the season. He's patient with his drives. It feels like he's dialing in some of his pull-up game. He's figuring out how to score without being like overly athletic, like overwhelmingly so.
The bully ball, Cody.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting more physical. He's taking it to people. He's using his size effectively.
Honestly, he drives like Los Angeles Lakers, maybe sub-all-star Luka Doncic. Like, he has the same sort of like style. Not saying he's exactly like that, but he's a good passer. He's a pretty good passer, right? I don't think he's a
very good passer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And between that and the fact that he can call on the shot a lot, one thing that gave me a little bit of pause, and maybe this is me wanting somebody to fit into different team contexts better and whatever else, but he's also playing for the Pistons, so who knows? But according to Basketball Reference, 19% of his twos are assisted, which is pretty low. So he's calling on himself to create a lot of shots. And honestly, when I watch, I'm like, I bet you a good amount of those are like either him getting a dribble handoff or like a basic pass from somebody, because it feels like every shot that he makes is just him going for it. And so I wonder, I'm like, what happens if he goes next to somebody else that can create a lot? But maybe that's an unfair standard. I should just judge what I'm seeing from Cade Cunningham. I think I probably would put him on the sub all-star side of things at this point. I don't love the defense as much. Yeah, I don't know. That's where I am right now.
I think the defense has been a little bit better for me this year.
Okay.
And maybe that's the context of being surrounded by better defenders and a defensive team. But think about what we just said with James Harden. I mean, there's a similar sort of role here in Detroit. And I think in the past, I've had bigger concerns about that defense. I think he's shored up his shot a little bit. And I think the overall, I mean, this is why he's purple. I think that overall range is right here. You can make an argument for him as an all-star. And I'm continuing to feel good. I'm going to put him on the all-star side of the line as well.
Cade Cunningham, all-star this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've seen enough Pistons.
I don't recall when this happened, but we had an episode about Cade Cunningham, and you asked me how many all-star teams he would make.
Oh, yes. Well, I always said, I think in the video, I said something like, I can't tell between 1 and 10.
And I said something, and if somebody can find that prediction and send it to me, I would love that, because he made the all-star team, right?
He made the all-star team.
Yeah. So we're on our way. We're on our way to whatever number I said.
Number 1. It's been checked off. We got number 1.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Our next purple player is LaMelo Ball. We've talked quite a bit about LaMelo Ball. For me, I cannot gift LaMelo Ball the things that I think he would likely benefit from by being in a better environment. And again, it's nothing really to do with the Charlotte coaching staff. It's their roster, it's their situation, it's their rebuild. But I think a player like that, as I've said before, you put him in a room with adults, you make him the 3rd or 4th best player, you give him a guiding light. And I think you'll see something different, because he's sort of been in the same, Cody, I was thinking about this the other day, preparing for the show. He's sort of been in the same basketball role and responsibility since 8th grade. He was a YouTube star. He's shooting the threes. He's playing off one foot. He's at Chino Hills. He goes to Australia. Then he's with Charlotte. I mean, I don't know how much has changed in the last decade. That's even is decade, 9 years. What is LaMelo? 23? Probably 9 years. Yeah. 9 years he's been playing this role of basketball celebrity. So I think all the things we've said about his value apply and then get him into this purple range. But I still think the defense needs to be tightened up. Some of the decision making needs to be tightened up. And then to me, he would be a top 25 kind of player. I'd feel more comfortable. So I'm going to go on the sub all-star side.
So I think it's interesting because he and Cade are really two interesting like comparison points. They're both taller point guards. But then beyond that, they have some very different styles, obviously. Cade strikes me as somebody that's much more buttoned up, much more controlling the tempo, hesitation, not relying on the athleticism, just trying to make that sort of play, right? Whereas LaMelo, I think better shooter. I'm pretty sure he's a better shooter. He definitely takes much more difficult shots, especially from distance. I think he has the capacity to be a better passer. I think if you start factoring in some of the wild things that he does and the turnovers that way, maybe you'd want Cade right now. But I guess what I'm saying here is that the ideal version of LaMelo Ball to me, it seems like he has a higher ceiling than Cade. I think he can be a better player than Cade. But right now, there's too many of those little nitpick moments where I think you're absolutely right putting him on the sub all-star side.
Okay, some of the talent is just ridiculous. This is why I wanted to start with the smalls. Hopefully, the other two positions aren't as arduous as this, because then you go to someone like Tyrese Halliburton, and Tyrese Halliburton at the beginning of last season was basically flirting with like being a top 10 player. He was out of his mind on offense. He was playing like one of the great offensive engines we've seen in the 21st century for a brief period. Maybe not a top 5 all-time guy or whatever, but his offense last year to start the year was so good. And so now you say, is the regression that we've seen since then to do with the hamstring? Is it to do with Pascal Siakam coming in and changing the role? Is it to do with a slight shift in the Pacers' approach offensively, where last year they were just doing some crazy stuff on defense, not helping a lot? And I always felt that that was an offensive decision to trigger the transition, fast break, cross matches, et cetera, that Tyrese thrived in. So do you have all these changes in the system that are sort of leading to this regression that we're seeing? Or is it that maybe he's not as good of a shooter as we saw? One of our Patreon subscribers, I think, was the one to mention that maybe he is kind of on a long heater in the past, and now he's coming back to earth with his shooting. And when you play this style, there's a difference between like 43% on threes, 10 threes a game, and 36% or whatever it is. And that doesn't open up the lane because he's not a great bursty player. So he really uses that shot. There's a lot of questions for me about Tyrese and where his true ability is and what that means. But the Pacers have been great for over a month. He is playing well again. He is a really, really good offensive player still. His defense has been honestly kind of solid. Like when you think about Tyrese, you don't think about that side of the ball. I should also mention that with Maxey as well. One of the things with Maxey that's impressed me is just that I think in the past you expect a guard like that to be really leaky defensively, and he's putting in way more effort and holding his own and even making some plays defensively with the steals numbers. Tyrese has had some plays around the rim that have caught my eye a little bit, like, whoa, okay, all right, Hallie, you're getting up there and blocking shots. You're making up for whatever you're losing on offense compared to your hot streak last year. So this is a tough one for me because I think he's a really high quality player. There's no doubt to me that if you're making a list, he's like a top 40 NBA player. But sort of the question becomes, if we're going into a tournament next week, is he at that all-star level of play right now? I don't know. That's why he's in the purple.
Go to Maxey just for a second. We should have mentioned that. I actually think that Maxey is a good defender. I think there's a cap for somebody that size and how good you can be if you're not like an all-time great, but he's legitimately somebody that tries. He has a high motor. He knows where to be. He's a solid defensive player. I think he's a better defensive player than Halliburton. That's not even a hot take. He's just a better defensive player than Hallie. But Hallie being bigger, I think weirdly, like I've seen it the last couple of years, he has this obscure ability to be able to block corner threes, which I think just reflects his ability to just like use his length to, when he does jump out in passing lanes, when he does jump out on shooters, he can like close out on somebody well. He can disrupt in that sort of way. It's some of the other stuff. It's like the mismatches. Like you get a big mismatch on him and it's just over. Like he's going to provide basically like, no, he's like, I can't touch this guy. Like, I don't know what to do in this instance. And they just drop step and make a layup sort of thing. Sometimes he gets lost on defense. So I think the defensive awareness hurts him a little bit, but like you said, a little bit more of an improvement. The heater comment you say is really interesting because in his first 191 games in the NBA, he's shooting 40.8% on his threes. 191 games. And after that, basically everything after that, it's right around 36.5%. Right. So then like the question you ask yourself is like, where does this actually land? Because if he is closer to the 40%, I mean, he's a much more deadly like offensive player, obviously, that you have to close out on him differently. You have to defend their spacing a little bit differently. So I'm not really sure, but if you factor all that in, the passing is still incredible. But he always has this issue of like the rim, the rim
Rim
attacking,
pressure, yeah.
the rim
Yeah.
pressure
He's
matched
one
here
of the
is
top
so much
5
better.
passers, by the way. You're asking about passers earlier. I think that's a great point, though. Keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't have the same sort of rim pressure, and I think like especially from what we're seeing now, maybe if he slowed down with the hamstring, maybe you get a defense that's dialed in, especially this year. Like I would love to see like a playoff series like Pacers Magic. Like what would happen there? How would he be able to handle like the hounds that would be unleashed on him there? Um, those are all my thoughts on Hallie.
Would you trade him to the Lakers for Dalton Connect, though? That's the question.
For Dalton Connect. No. Could you? Who else could you? You could actually just take that out. Just give me a second rounder. Just give me a second rounder. That's
You
probably
mean
good
you
enough.
would do Halliburton and a second rounder for Dalton Connect for taking on the risk of you don't know about his shooting. It's a risk that you have to
Yeah.
take on if you're taking on Halliburton and that big contract. That's what you're saying?
The hamstring scares me too. You know what? Send the first to the Lakers as well. Like they can take a first. Man,
Uh,
that makes you feel better.
Derek White is another purple for me, but as much as I want Derek White to be acknowledged as an all-star because of what he did last year and because of his overall play and his defense and hustle and IQ and just all these little things that just make, like we talked about this with Kyle Lowry years ago, the little things, the connective tissue, these are championship plays. These just pump your value as a player on different high-level teams. And the thing about that I think is so impressive that maybe we don't always explicitly state for people who are like, why are these guys so high on, I don't know why people on the internet are talking like this. They're, why are these guys so high on people who aren't big bucket getters? When you go to a high level team, they already have a lot of skills. So it's really hard to add value. You have to be really good at basketball. And some of the easiest ways to do that are filling in the spaces defensively with spacing, with cutting, with moving, with your decision making, with your hustle, with your rebounding. Who steals more rebounds than Derek White from opposing teams? That would be a fun stat, like stolen rebounds where they grab it and you sneak up from the baseline and take it out of their hands as they're passing to their point guard next to them or something. So with all that said, I think last year might have been the year. I can't remember where we had him. I think we ended up having him in the sub all-star when we did the show. And I kind of remember thinking at the end of the year, Cody, if we do the show again, I think I might have another Celtic in there, right? But I don't think he's played well enough this year to be on that side of the line, and I just don't have the precedent to give it to him. So he's a purple sub all-star for me.
Yeah, the thing with him, like you said, I love everything that he does. And you talk about some examples of some of the little things. Like if you're a guard, can you flow into like, I'm going to pass it, I'm going to set a nice screen, and then maybe later on in the action, I'm going to kind of cut towards the basket and be able to make a play out of the dunker spot. Like if you can do all of those things, that's so much more valuable than just being like, I'm going to run back and forth on the perimeter and wait for somebody to kick it out to me. I think there's actually a couple of guys that we're going to talk about today that get demoted a bit because they don't have these sorts of little types of skills. But with somebody like Derek White, the question I ask myself is, like, how much can somebody like that actually move the needle on offense? Like, comparatively to some of these other players we're talking about, like, he's a good player, but you know, he's not going to come in and really change how much your offense is producing when he gets in the game. And obviously, he's a great defensive player, but he's also not titanically moving the needle on defense. So when you take that all, he also landed on the sub all-star side for me.
Excellent. Yeah. I think we should point out 38% from three this year. It's pretty close. Last year he was at 40%. That quick trigger three of his and the way it fits in the offense is beautiful, but you're making a great point in the sense of it almost doesn't matter what type of role you have in play or what type of offense. You're never going to get the big, like, significant shifts in moving the needle on offense for him. And it's kind of going to limit where he lands as a player because he's not like a monster impact defender. Okay. I now have, Cody, I think we've covered all my purples. That's a sentence I didn't think I'd say this morning.
Can I say a name that I think I may have missed him? I think I missed this player.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you say Ja Morant?
I might have forgotten to say Ja Morant. Thank you. He's right here. He's on the list.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. I think I got too excited because I was like, would you want Ja Morant to be a max player? Or, would you trade? Sorry. Okay. So now we have some solid classic sub all-stars that I don't, if you want to stop and talk about them, we can, but I don't know how much we need to stop and talk about them. I think the classic sub all-stars in this category are Desmond Bain from the Memphis Grizzlies, Tyler Hero from the Miami Heat, and Norman Powell from the Los Angeles Clippers.
So for people that are looking strictly at the all-star team, like what would you say separates somebody like Tyler Hero from Tyrese Maxey?
Tyler Hero from Tyrese Maxey?
Yeah, just in case somebody's just
two totally different levels of player.
I'm just saying one didn't make the playoffs. The all-star team, one did. They're in the same conference. They play basically the same position-ish, sort of.
Oh, yeah, well, I think that's a lot. I think that voting has a lot to do with the Heat having like a whopping 4 more wins than the Philadelphia 76ers, because I don't know if people know this, but the Heat team is much better than whatever the Sixers have been trying to throw out there. No offense to the Sixers players who are overtasked and have lately done a much better job playing their heart outs, and their defense has been much more competitive, and they've been winning some games to scrounge their way to like 19 wins as of recording this, and the Heat have 23 wins. I mean, we've talked about this before. I have a chapter in Thinking Basketball, the book, on this, how it drives me nuts that voters go at the deadline, they look at the wins column, they look at the leading scorer, and they go, okay, this first team, he did this, the number 1 team deserves 2, and the number 2 team deserves 2, and you get down to the number 5, and the Heat are 6th. And it's silly because like in a week they could flip places. Or if Embiid and if Embiid finds the fountain of youth and he goes and drinks the Holy Grail at the end of Indiana Jones and his knee is fixed and Paul George comes back, and Paul George would also have to go on that pilgrimage and also drink from the cup from the Holy Grail. If you haven't seen the movie, I won't tell you which cup it is. But you know, then they storm by Miami. It's just such a weird thing historically. I mostly have it from a historical bias, right? Of like looking at past seasons and being like, why is that player an all-star and then Reggie Miller's not an all-star? And it turns out a couple of those Pacers teams during Reggie Miller's prime started really slowly and then just stormed the league the rest of the way and made like the conference finals. And you're like, but these are 2 different classes of players. And then if you had a podcast back then, you'd turn the podcast on and someone would be like, well, I couldn't vote for Reggie Miller because his team won 2 fewer games when I put my ballot in. That's my rant on that, Cody.
Okay, I like that. I think that's a very good take, Ben.
Okay, so I said Desmond Bain.
Yep.
Norman Powell.
Yep.
Who's been great. He's been great, but he's too one-dimensional. He's too one-dimensional for me to get higher value here. He's kind of a classic sub-all-star type player. Tyler Hero. I am going to throw another name in here that we've discussed before over the years. I think Fred VanVleet has done a really nice job in Houston. And I think the sort of role he plays steering the offense, the defense is actually he's in a great defensive team and he's not a defensive liability. I think he's in this range. So I'm going to go with Fred VanVleet. And then obviously for you, I saved the best for last. Jalen Suggs is a sub all-star.
Okay. I was wondering if we were going to get there because it feels like, you know, he's not Derek White. Like they both decidedly play quite a bit differently. He's not nearly the shooter Derek White is. Derek White is like secretly a really, really good shooter. Like you look at some historical indicators. I just took Jalen Suggs and decided to talk about Derek White. Classic move here. But Jalen Suggs is, I think, better at organizing the offense than it might seem, right? Like he's not necessarily a great passer. You know, he's not going to be like Trae Young out there, but having like a steady hand that can bring the ball up, distribute the ball pretty well. Cause I think we're seeing some rocky offensive situations while he's been out for a little bit here. I mean, all of that's the case, but also defensively, he's just a wrecking ball, Ben. Just a wrecking ball. Who would you say is who's impacting the game more on defense, him or Derek White?
I think Suggs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Orlando has fallen apart largely as they've lost players like him. But really, the incredible play of Goga Batadze and Suggs, along with Franz and the defensive talent that they had after Banchero went out at the beginning of the year. I mean, they were really good. They won 12 out of 13. They were one of the best teams in the league to me. And by the time you got Suggs out of that equation, they just fell apart.
Mhm.
So I think he's a monster defensively from the guard position, and I think he does what he can offensively in terms of like all the little Derek White things or 3-point shooting that comes and goes, but is better than you think. And you pointed out, like he can organize the offense a little bit, but he's not really a big offensive mover. I think the totality is this quality of player.
I love that shout out for him.
Yeah.
Is that all of the guards? Is there anyone else?
I mean, we're only, what are we going to do? Come back next week and do another position? I mean, we've just like 1 hour. The guards
this is
are
basically like half the
unbelievable.
All-Stars. I feel like at this point, there's almost a bias towards getting guards in there because of their maybe weighting in terms of how important they are to an offense.
I feel like in the past, we were lighter on guards, and I can't even say we're done because I have a couple. We've now reached the point of the show where we say, okay, are there any other players on not the purple zone, but in this yellow zone or whatever it is of like, did you consider for sub all-stars? And there's a couple other players I considered, and I might want to stick 1 or 2 more on the team before we're done. I'm just going to say some names as a shout out, as a point of recognition. Oh my God, Cody, we forgot to start the show with the Portland Trailblazers. Now we've ruined the entire flow. I don't know what to do. We're going to have to get to that. We're going to have to wait a position. We'll wait a position and get to them.
We'll get
I'm seeing Anthony Simon's name and realizing that he's part of a bigger picture discussion with some of these players. So I think Austin Reeves has been really good this year for the Lakers. I think when you look at defensive players like Alex Caruso, Dyson Daniels, maybe even Lou Dort, there's something there. You're talking about players that are top 100 players that kind of start to encroach on this value that I have to think about. Obviously, your favorite player of all time, Drew Holiday. Although over the years, I mean, we've had Drew. If you look at our history here in the last 7 years that we've done this, we have Drew Holiday on the sub all-star team last year and the sub all-star team in 2020. And we have him as an all-star 3 other times. So he comes up a ton. He's in the conversation for me, Cody, but I just feel like the age is starting to get to him. And he's one of these classic players where it's like, do I feel really confident? Like the illusion I made to Draymond Green and Chris Paul all those years ago, that when we get to the playoffs, we're going to get like a top 40 player from Drew Holiday. I don't. I think it's in play, but I don't know if I feel like really confident saying that. So, yeah, I'm going to pass it to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a guy that's about to turn 35. He's a guard that's not like a knockdown shooter that teams are scheming against the Celtics by letting him play. In fact, there's some crunch time games where they straight up like take him out and put Peyton Pritchard in instead. I mean, that hasn't happened a lot. Like Drew Holiday is still part of their crunch time lineup. I do think that when we get to the playoffs, he'll be flirting with that top 40 position. But Ben, like we gotta let your heroes go at some point. It's like everyone ages. It catches up to all of us, man. So if you don't want to put him sub all-star, this is probably the year to start doing it. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I think he's going to go on the other side of the line. Caruso might be the most serious contender because of his defensive chops from what I just mentioned. He's also a really high IQ player, a good passer, a decent shooter. He can play 5 positions for Oklahoma City. He's someone who I think we should consider. But I have 2 more names here before we clear out this category and move on.
Can I kind of toss Caruso aside? He's playing 19 minutes a game.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you. You're making it easy for me.
Yeah.
Okay. But the other 2 players are not playing 19 minutes a game. And speaking of your heroes, they are both my heroes. One of them is Andrew Nembhard from the Indiana Pacers.
Ooh.
I mean, I don't quite know what to do with him yet because it's sort of like an emerging property. And so I don't even know if the data, right? You're just talking about something from like the last month or so that's really clicked. You have a really good defender. You have a good passer. You can play a little pick and roll game. So I don't know. But the one that I actually have here in sort of I'm pretty sure he needs to be the last sub all-star spot is Jamal Murray. Because as much as he struggled to start the year and as much as his leg injuries have been a problem, Cody, have you seen the Nuggets play lately? Because he's pretty good again and he's moving well again. And when you start to look at the totality of where he is as a player right now, especially defensively getting a little bit better, the shots everything just looks smoother and better. Like, to me, you look around the league and you look at all the guys we just talked about for sub all-star, and this version of Jamal Murray is kind of at the end of that range in my mind.
I want to talk about Nembhard for a second. I feel like we've talked about Jamal Murray. I feel like it's this past couple of seasons, the finals run, obviously we know he's a very, very good player. And I do think, like, between the Olympics and whatever else we saw, yeah, there is a bit of a downward movement from him. I think in the past he's been a straight up all-star, but I think he deserves to have that sub all-star position based off what we've seen recently. I think he's improved his game. He's not improved his game. That makes it sound like he's wholesale improved everything. He just looks better recently. Nembhard, his case is can I see this guy playing on the Celtics case, right? Can I see this guy playing on the Thunder case? Like, if you took him and you threw him on one of those rosters, would it work? Would their flow still be there? Would he be able to defensively hold up? And Nembhard definitely could. Like, if you took like Derek White or Drew Holiday and you just put Nembhard in there, I think the Celtics look very good still. Like, he's able to do all of those things. But again, sort of in the like Drew Holiday sort of case here, how much is he moving the needle offensively right now? Right? I don't think he's, like, even at the advanced stage we talk about, I don't think he's organizing to the degree that Drew Holiday still can, right? He is still, like, Drew is still a classic point guard that can take the reins of it, run an offense. Nembhard doesn't strike me as that just yet. I don't think his offense is moving the needle fully to the point where I'd want to call him a sub all-star, but he's definitely a guy that I think is going to be like a classic sub all-star for like a decade.
Okay. I'm going to go Murray in. We're going to move on to the next position.
I don't know if this guy's a wing, but there's one other guy that I think is important to talk about if you don't count him as a wing.
No, I count him as a wing.
Okay. We'll see.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. I know who you're going to ask about.
I don't think you do, but we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right. You're going to write it down. You're going to write it down, and we're going to get back to it and see if I know.
We'll talk about him.
Should we do the wings next?
Let's do wings next.
Okay. All-star wings. I get hungry when I start talking about all-star wings. Jason Tatum.
Yep.
Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder.
The big man.
No, J-Dub. We're doing wings, remember. LeBron James. Still an all-star.
Yeah. So there's 2 all-stars on the team now.
No, only one. You're saying because we're giving Luka the all-star nod.
Yeah.
Because in real life he didn't make it. Yeah.
The LA Diet all-star nod, yeah.
Yeah. LeBron James. And that is my list of locks in the all-star category for wings.
Ooh. How funny. I have Jimmy Butler listed here, but I think we could probably
Jimmy
he was playing really well.
I know. So Jimmy Butler, I don't know what to do with, because I really don't know what to do with Jimmy Butler. I do like there to be, we talk about being forward facing and trying to evaluate the player and how good they are and allowing the future to unfold in the sense of, like, we played 20 games. We don't need to just be results oriented. But I do love that this episode and this show and this team and this concept does capture a snapshot of play quality. So if someone plays like 5 games in the past, we've kind of said you're either in an injured reserve category, or I don't know what to do with you, or I've seen you play the last 5 games and you look great, and so we're good. And Jimmy Butler fits in none of those categories. Maybe he like tanked the season, but also looked really good for a couple games, but also he's 35 and a half years old. And my takeaway when I listed this out was that when he comes back and plays, he will not be worse than a sub all-star, but I don't know what to do after that.
Yeah. I think that's all very fair. But if he were playing, like we did this episode before the whole fiasco with him being like the staring contest between him and Pat Riley, I think he would be an all-star.
I think so.
Level
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
That's good to see.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is deeply uncomfortable conversation number 1, Ben. Deeply for people.
Deeply? You mean Jimmy?
No, you did not say a perennial wing all-star, Ben.
Well, I'm not done listing my all-stars. I just gave you my slam dunks.
Oh, I thought, okay, let's keep going.
We now have to go to the purple zone.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so my purple zone players were, I'm going to go through them one by one.
Okay.
They were Pascal Siakam, Franz Wagner, Jaylen Brown, and Kevin Durant.
Yep.
I think I'm going to go on the all-star side of the line. I've been thinking about this a lot for Franz Wagner.
He crossed
I am.
the threshold.
What's that?
He crossed the threshold for
Cross
you.
the threshold. Yeah, I've seen enough. Seen enough. I am also going to go on the all-star side of the line from my Indiana Pacers, Pascal Siakam. He is cooking. This is the best he's played in years. He's playing defense. He's playing offense. That's what you do in basketball. You play defense and offense. We're shooting basketballs. Would you like to talk about the other two players? Because I know you would.
Let's talk about Siakam for a second, actually. I really like Siakam. He's actually one of my favorite watches, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think he's like, you said, he's not a slam dunk all-star type of guy. But Siakam, fun little statistical stat here. Let's
yes,
say that
yes, Cody. Yes.
If I do that a few more times,
give us this numerical number. Go ahead.
You might be trading me for peanuts pretty soon after this. Can you trade me to LA? Like, can I go there too? Like, is there anything I could do?
Well, we'll see if we can get Max Christie.
Siakam's never, I can't say never because he has one season on very, very low volume, but he's never shot over 30% from three in the playoffs. Never shot over 30% from three in the playoffs. And I think a big part of what makes him look great this season offensively, so he's shooting 40% on solid volume. It's not the most threes he's taken ever, but solid volume, right? So that spacing aspect gives him a nice little boost there. It helps the Pacers do their thing a little bit more. Now, that does not account for the fact that Siakam is a genius in terms of like getting into the isolation game, just being physical with guys. Siakam is incredibly physical. He can run out. He's a great transition player. I think he's a solid passer. Like, he can identify, like, identify defenses that are coming, make that skip pass and whatever else. But the shooting makes me a little bit nervous, and it feels like a little bit of a mirage going into a playoff series. Ben.
Mirage. He's upgraded that shot a little bit. You work with the shooting coaches, you get the form, he's at that age, right? You get a little bit older. I'm not saying that he's going to go into the playoffs and shoot 40% from three or whatever it is, shoot at 41% from three right now. But I do think from watching them that he will be okay in a playoff setting from downtown. I'm not entirely worried about it.
Okay.
I don't know if there's huge statistical indicators to suggest that like he'll be a good 3-point shooter, but I kind of could make the argument that what you've seen in the playoffs that you just cited is almost too low and he'll regress upward to the mean because I don't think he's ever been like 20-something% as a true 3-point shooter. But the rest of the game is the defense and the passing and the middle of the floor and the isolation and the mismatch hunting and how effective he's been at taking advantage of those mismatches in key situations for the Pacers down the stretch. I gotta reward it. Yep.
I'm thinking about a play against the Cavaliers that kind of just like highlights everything that I really like about him. He starts off, he's like handling the ball, like you do. You dribble the ball between your legs a couple times, you throw it up, and you yell, "Kobe."
Cody, do we even have time for plays today? Do we have time for plays?
This one we're going to, but he handles, does his thing, he passes it off, he sets a screen, he slips, catches the ball on the slip, up fakes. He gets like two guys up in the air and then does this really slick like reverse layup, all in like one fluid motion going from there. And I'm like, okay, you can go from like handler to receiver of the pass to finishing like that. He's just a high level player. Like give me Siakam on my roster, man.
Okay, I assumed you wanted to talk about Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant. That's who I assumed you were excited to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about Durant.
I mean, he's still an incredible scorer, an incredible shot maker. Everything else is getting worse. So it's like his value is just the stamina, the playmaking, the defense, the awareness, the movement, the rim pressure, the soft passes for turnovers. They're all just, it's kind of like the other side of the Asian curve. Like, you're a baby and you grow up and people take care of you. And then you go out in the world and you become a big, strong man. And that was Durant for a long time, even though the 185 bench press thing, don't worry about it. Just stick with the metaphor. And then as you get older, you're back to people taking care of you and feeding you food and, all that stuff. It's the other side of the life cycle of life, except he's still like Professor X with the mind, except the mind in this case is scoring. This is one of my best metaphors ever. Don't tell me otherwise.
Yeah. Isn't that the Sphinx riddle in like Oedipus or Antigone or something like that? It's like, what?
You can't just cite classics 1 hour into this podcast. Who knows what you're talking about?
It's like what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening or something like that. And it's like person because they crawl and then they walk on 2 legs and then they have a cane. I thought that was the Sphinx. Maybe I'm wrong.
I kind of feel the same way I do about Devin Booker with Durant, where I'm like, God, if they were just in different situations, we would view them so much more positively. I mean, in this case, many people view Durant positively because they just de facto give him credit based on his reputation and his scoring. But he's 36 and a half years old. I think he's on the line. I'm gonna go, maybe for the last time, I'm gonna go all-star with Durant.
Okay. I felt that too. I did. Yeah. I still, when I watch him, I'm like, this dude can still really fill it up. He's really like basically impossible to defend from that mid range. Yeah, I like Durant as an all-star.
Yeah, and we're not going to have the same conversation again that we had about Jaylen Brown last year, right? Has anything changed for you?
I'm just taking a look at what was just said in the comments, and that person is correct. That person read
what was in the comments.
It's just an Oedipus reference. That's very true.
Yeah.
That is the point. That is the Oedipus complex.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really want to go like hardcore on Jaylen Brown. To me, I don't know, Ben. I think Jaylen Brown's a sub all-star.
Wow.
I do.
Wow.
I do. He's one of the big box score. I want more from the little things type of guys I'm talking about. I want more from like the off ball awareness. I want more with the connective passing type stuff. He does great job isolating and throwing down big dunks and making big shots and playing one-on-one defense. But the other stuff leaves me wanting more.
You're never happy that year after year the team is better with him on the bench than on the court. You're never happy about that.
I'm never going to let that one go.
I much in the way that I value some of what Siakam does, I do feel like there's enough with defensive versatility and scoring to make the argument for Brown in the all-star position. And I'm just in a good mood today. I just feel like the league is so deep, Cody. There's so much talent. I think Brown's an all-star.
I can't do the one-on-one swap because they play different positions, but I feel like Siakam is decidedly better than Jaylen Brown.
I love this.
Yeah.
This is
I just do.
We got to get that on a t-shirt or something.
I'm sorry if I'm a hater, but I'm here to speak.
Are you ready for the classic sub all-star wing list that I have?
Oh yeah.
OG Anunoby.
Mm-hmm.
That's the list. The only other person I have here is Kawhi Leonard, but he just hasn't played enough.
No.
When he's played, I think he's been a sub all-star, and he's flirting with being an all-star. And it's so funny because did I say this on the pod? And maybe I told you, I said, it's so amazing. The Clippers are really good. They've had a great season. We might do some content on them. We have talked about Harden and the defense and Norm Powell and Zubats and Cody's favorite player, Chris Dunn. And they've just been wonderful. And Ty Lue's done a great job. And shout out to the front office for just killing it with the acquisitions in the offseason, replacing Paul George. And I said, it's really interesting with the Clippers. No one is going to get a bigger player, a better player at the deadline than the Clippers acquiring Kawhi Leonard out of nowhere. And apparently I was wrong because that's not even true about the city of Los Angeles. Yeah. So let's
that was good.
Let's go to the wings. Who are
wait. A lot of things. You said go to the wings. Do you mean you're going to transition to the bigs?
No, we have to do the fringe wings. We have to do the wings.
Okay.
Yeah, who the wings? Some of them are on the side of the sub all-star. I'm just OG Anunoby, classic sub all-star. We're done. Now we have.
Sorry, you really wrong-footed me there. That was good.
No, I wasn't trying to. I'm saying like we have a couple guys to discuss, and I think before we do anything right now, I know there's some players everyone's excited to talk about. I messed it up at the beginning of the show. We have to talk about the Portland Trailblazers. My Portland Trailblazers. They've won 8 out of 9. The Blazer Mania is coming back. The ghost of Bill Walton. The tie-dye t-shirts are raining from the Moda Center. They're the most fun team. I can't do any more than like 20 seconds on them. But in a serious vein, Cody, it is very rare for teams that are terrible to suddenly get pretty good. Like they're not as good as the Pacers. They're not a contending team, but they've had good wins. They played the Thunder incredibly well in their one loss in the last 9 games. They've won 8 out of 9 games. When Denny Avdia plays, they're outscoring teams by like 8 points per 100 this month. And so they just have a ton of players who I think in all the years I've done this, it's the weirdest thing. Because if they played like this for the entire season and they had 35, 45 wins, whatever it comes out to, maybe even more, Some of these players would be talked about as all-stars. And the way the team is constructed, we would definitely go, oh, they got 3 or 4 candidates here, man. Denny Avdia is a really good candidate. What do we make of Anthony Simons? Jeremy Grant. Is DeAndre Ayton a sub all-star again? What's happening? He had 25 points and 20 rebounds last night. He's cooking people in the mid-range. He's blocking Giannis Antetokounmpo at the rim and eating his lunch, like throwing hooks over him on his head. You missed that when the Blazers beat the Bucks, because they didn't beat the Bucks once this month. They beat the Bucks twice this month. And then Denny got out of the lineup and then they lost. So I'm saying, just philosophically, I don't remember ever having a situation where, like, what do we do with this? What do we do with this team? I don't know what to make of any of them.
In this house, Ben, we only recognize one Giannis Ayton play. None of the other ones exist.
Oh,
there's only
that
one
was a deep cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people know, though.
They know.
Denny Avdia is really fun to watch, Ben.
He's really good. Yeah.
He is really strong driving to the basket. That's the thing that really stands out to me. He's got the slow step thing, and he just, not in the doing an offensive foul thing, but he's great as using his body to clear out space. But then the trick after that is he clears out space and then he still explodes. He's long enough, he's tall enough, he's athletic enough that all of a sudden you can't give him that amount of space, because all of a sudden he's just at the rim, right? The shooting, again, it seems like he's a consistent 35 and under percent 3-point shooter. But the flexibility defensively is very switchable. He's got good instincts on that end. I don't know. I'd feel comfortable if you said put him on the sub all-star side.
I know. But yet, if you look at his season totals and how young he is, he just turned 24. And then you look at the last month, it's like night and day. Mm-hmm. So what do I do with that? What do I do with a 24-year-old who I also think has a bright future? I could cheat a little bit and be like, I can put him on the sub all-star team because it probably will look good going forward. But also, if he was 28, would we do that? We would have all these prior biases about the player and be like, he's playing well for a month. But so I don't know what to do with any of the Trailblazers. I think I didn't even mention the greatest Trailblazer of all time, Toumani Camara, who is he reminds me physically of Scottie Pippen without some of the same offensive game, like the way he moves and covers the court. And last night, I think he had 5 threes, and just the defense. I mean, did you see what he did to Paolo Banchero at the rim twice in a 2-minute stretch? He just completely sent it back in his face. He's amazing. I don't know, again, if you go back to the conversation about someone like Caruso, I don't know where that kind of very limited offensive player emerging, what is he going to do, plus big defender, I don't think it's this class. But the whole Blazers confound me because of how well they've started playing all of a sudden and what's happening.
Kamara's the rare defensive player that, on one hand, he can pick up Trae Young full court like he did and force a turnover, straight up, just I'm going to strip you and we're going to get the ball back. But also he can guard Banchero and just throw it back in his face. So the Pippen shout out is great. Very flexible defensively.
So some other sort of names that we have to take care of here, and then we can quickly move on. We're moving with great alacrity today. Amen Thompson, you familiar with him?
Oh yeah,
another one who's just come on like a nuclear weapon in the last month. Although in Amen's case, I think it's just locked in. I think it's just a question of how much better he's going to get, because to me, we now have someone who is an elite defensive player who also might not actually be a giant negative on offense anymore. And actually, if you include his rebounding and his screening and his cutting, and wait a sec, Cody, what's that? Is that Giannis Antetokounmpo's music? If you just get out of the way and space the floor and give him the ball and early, it turns out no one can stay in front of him. This is very interesting. He is a very interesting case right now.
Can I say I would rather not put him there yet? This feels like you were just talking about the youth aspect of it. I don't think it's quite there yet. I don't think it's clear. You can say the Giannis thing, the comparison there, but I don't think he's even close to having that kind of off.
I know you're not
saying
mean
he's
as
not.
an archetype. Yeah.
I get that. But even with the Giannis archetype, I don't like the clear out sort of offense thing. You have to be extraordinarily special to make that work. I don't think he quite makes the sub all-star cut, but he's extremely close. And again, this is a guy that I think is going to be there basically every year forever going forward.
Well, I think that, like Avdia, he's played at this level recently, but I don't entirely know what to do with that. I don't really know what to do with some of these young players who it's just been a month, and I can easily see it. I kind of feel like I'm more inclined to go in with the men. But I mean, don't forget, he's doing this on a great team against the best teams in the league, night in and night out.
So, okay, if you could start a playoffs roster, right? Who would you take right now, Denny Avdia or Amin Thompson?
Why are you doing this to me? Right? I was having a good day.
These are the questions.
I mean, would I take both of them over Luka Doncic? Obviously, that's a clear. Okay, that part is well known. That's very obvious.
But if you were trying to trade Luka, would you even ask to see if those guys are available, or would you just pick a team and just go? Like, what would you do?
Why would you shop Luka around when you could just get a Ben Thompson? You're being silly.
Yeah, coupons are silly. There's no point in like finding the best deal. Just like, this is what I want. Let's do it.
They're like opposite players. They're like the inverse here. Amen and Denny are like the inverse of each other. Very, very hard. I kind of feel like I don't know. Can we talk about some other players and then maybe I can circle back to that?
Let's do it.
Jalen Johnson, Josh Hart, Scotty Barnes.
I think that Jalen Johnson is clearly a sub-all-star.
Okay.
And I'm heartbroken. Heartbroken that he's out for the season, man.
Why do you have to do what is going on? Why are you being such a
Because it's terrible. We don't get to see him anymore. I love watching Jalen Johnson play basketball. Right? He's the exact kind of forward you want to see. Scotty Barnes. Let's talk about him for a second. I really like watching him play basketball, Ben. I really like watching him. I think he's figured out this whole, like, I'm going to run over to the nail, and I'm going to run the offense from there, and I'm going to sling passes around because I've got good vision, and I really want to move the ball around. He's a very willing passer, like maybe to a fault at times, right? Like, he's not trying to be like, I'm not a great scorer, but I'm still going to shoot a ton of times. He's like, I'm going to try this pass out. I'm going to no look. Sometimes I'll throw it into the crowd, but it's totally okay. He's great at grabbing and going. He's so good at pushing it in transition. He's a devastating transition finisher because of his athleticism and length. Between that and his defense, the motor, all of the other things he's able to do at his size, I think he's a pretty clear sub all-star.
Who's this?
Scotty.
I have Scotty as a sub all-star as well.
Good.
I have Scotty and Jalen Johnson, and I think I'm also going to have Josh Hart this year as a sub all-star.
Josh Hart is so fascinating. Please talk about him.
Well, I typically we've talked about this with Danny Green before. Like typically players like that who play that role and kind of have a smaller needle to move, if you will, are great players. They can be top 100 players, top 75 players, but they almost bump up against a value limit when we get to the sub all-star team. But in the case of Hart this year, between his rebounding, his shooting, his passing, his grab and go, and then obviously his versatility and his defense, like he's just been ridiculously good. He's just been really, really good for the Knicks. And I kind of feel like he's a sub all-star quality player. So that's where I go. Yeah.
It is pretty incredible. You have a guy he's like 6'4" according to Basketball Reference. So it probably means he's like 6'2.5", because that's just usually how it works. He's averaging almost 10 rebounds a game. And according to Basketball Reference, 42% of his shots are from within 3 feet of the basket. That's just wild for a guy like that. I mean, he is just constant energy. You cannot take a break when he's on the court. Like you said, when you have that sort of role on a team, there really is only so much of a band. Like there's only so much you can do to maximize that. Like I don't think you can have like the kind of impact that trade asset Luka Doncic could have in the playoffs, right? Like you're not going to hit that if you have the Josh Hart role. But like you say with Danny Green, even though they're like pretty different players, Josh Hart is a much better passer than Danny Green. He's a much worse shooter than Danny Green. I think Danny Green's probably a better like perimeter defender, whereas Josh Hart is a higher motor and things like that. If you fulfill that role maximally, you can squeeze out quite a bit from that lemon.
Yeah. Let me say some other names, and then you tell me how much you want to discuss them. Mikal Bridges, Zach LaVine, Paul George.
I want to talk about Zach LaVine. He's the guy I wanted to bring up. He's the one I wanted to bring up. Let's see. He's a really good scorer. He fills it up. He's shooting the lights out this year. Last I checked, who knows? Stats change, Ben. He was shooting like 44% from three, which, is actually, it feels like the way people talk about Zach LaVine, he's like a career 44% three-point shooter. He's not. This is a bit of an outlier for him this season, but he's still an incredible three-point shooter. I think we've talked about him in terms of being a nuclear shooter. Like if he gets going, he's unbelievable. But he's also a guy that I've kind of dubbed an anti-little things guy. Like I watch him play offense and I'm just like, what you doing besides like going back and forth from your 3-point area, waiting to get the ball again? And defensively, he's very clearly a negative. So I take all that, you take the shooting, the spacing and the scoring, and then the other not little things. And I'm like, what do we do with that?
This is the best.
What do you do?
It's very weird. It's very weird because maybe it's kind of like the inverse of what we just talked about with Josh Hart. Maybe his scoring and his shooting is so good and he can float around off ball and attack closeouts and all that stuff. And so maybe that gives you enough value to offset the fact that you don't do any of the stuff Josh Hart does. But I don't know, because I think if you look at the fact that his 3-point shooting should come down if we're going to play a playoff run for the next 2 months. I mean, another thing that's so big right now that we haven't somehow discussed in over an hour is physicality. I mentioned it with Trae Young briefly, but this game is physical. You got to be strong. That's one of the reasons why I like Siakam on the all-star line. Like, we get to high-level basketball, we get to the best teams. Guys are playing hard. They are sore from the weight room. They're like, what did I do? Did I do legs? Did I deadlift? Why am I so sore? Oh, I was in the post with Pascal Siakam and Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jaren Jackson. Sorry, spoilers. I can't get ahead of myself here. But I that's one of the reasons why I think I'm on the all-star side with Jaylen Brown. Like, that ability to play at that physical big level when the game gets really intense like that on offense and defense, there's a little extra value there for me from these players. And I don't get that sense from Zach LaVine. So I'm really not sure what to do with him.
And I feel like there's some people that might look and be like, well, he's got a great on-off type of season right now.
He doesn't, right?
He does. This season, he does.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Which is the thing, because if you go back in the past, that's not the case.
Exactly.
Not the case.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm willing to say that like he's a very much improved offensive player that can move the needle that much. But from what I watch with the Bulls, Ben, I do not quite think that. And I don't know.
You know who else I feel this way about? Trey Murphy III.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many Pelicans games you've seen, but he will have. You'll turn the game on. At the end of the game, he'll have 40 points, and you're just like, yeah, Trey Murphy III is doing Trey Murphy III things. This is amazing. He's got 8 threes and he dunked on 3 guys and he has 2 block shots. And then you kind of like go into the film and you watch the rest of the possessions and you're like, what's happening the rest? What's happening the rest of the time there? Is this a Pelicans thing? The Pelicans are, yeah, it's a lot. So
what was it? A couple days ago, they played the Celtics. And at one point the Celtics were like, we're going to double team you. And Trey Murphy III was like Tony Kukoc against Jordan and Pippen in the Olympics. And it was rough going at that point on. I'm like, I don't know. The passing's not great. The defense not as good as I want it to be.
Yep. Yeah. We're big fans, very talented player, but everything we just said about LaVine, I think applies there. Let me say a few more names of players I considered. Shout out to Keon Ellis for the way he's playing. Michael Porter Jr. is actually playing pretty well again. He was there a couple years ago. We already said Denny Avdia. Aaron Gordon is still a really good player in Denver. And I think that there's one more. There's one more who I have to decide. He's in my yellow zone here. You know who's been good at the basketball, speaking of physicality and size and all these other things? PJ Washington's getting pretty good at the basketball from the Dallas Mavericks. Now, I understand, he's on the Mavericks. There may be conditioning issues. You have no idea. But what do you think of that?
I do genuinely want to see what happens if Luka's not. I mean, obviously, he's been playing great without Luka for the last month, right? So maybe now that the weight is off his shoulders, Ben, PJ can really unleash himself.
I see what you did there. The weight. Yeah.
I feel like he doesn't do enough offensively for me, right? Like maybe he does some little things, but it's not enough for me to truly consider him as a sub all-star. He's a great role player. Don't get me wrong,
Paul George is honestly the hardest one because it feels so easy for him to access a gear that is like at least a top 40 gear in the playoffs. But I have not seen it this season, and he's another player who's 35 years old. And I mean, I have no platform to speak on this. I'm not judging, but maybe he's just into the podcasting. Maybe it's podcast P instead of playoff P. Maybe that's what we got.
Well, he's
So
bored with playing center, so I don't know if that boredom is leaking elsewhere at some point. What would you rather happen? Would you rather have a player that's unconditioned or a player that's bored?
a player that's what?
Unconditioned, maybe not physically fit.
Yeah.
Or somebody that's bored.
Bored?
Yeah. Paul George had a comment once where he said he was bored with playing the center position or defending centers.
I'm going to go with Scotty Barnes, Josh Hart, Jalen Johnson, and can I put a man in?
Sure.
I don't know what to do with a man.
Okay. I would say no, but I wouldn't hate it.
I'm gonna come back to. Let's come back to it. We have the bigs. We have the bigs. We still have to do the bigs.
Man,
what?
It's just a lot of podcasts.
There's not that many bigs left. Yeah, not that many bigs left. So the bigs for this sub all-star. Let's start with the locks. The all-star locks. The audience wants a man. The audience wants a man right now. I will say that. I will take that into consideration when I come back and finalize in a minute. We do have some more slam dunk bigs for me, Cody.
Okay.
Victor Wembanyama.
Yep.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis. The championship centerpiece of the Dallas Mavericks, who will not be playing center. He will be playing power forward for the Mavericks as he catches lobs from Kyrie, storming his way to the title. Evan Mobley. I think he's a slam dunk all-star.
Yeah, same.
Don't have to think about it. Karl Anthony Towns. What an offensive player. Oh, my goodness. Ridiculous. And my last slam dunk all-star big. Well, wait a second. I forgot about Nikola Jokic. Hold on. I forgot about Nikola Jokic.
I just marked him off while you were talking.
Nikola Jokic. And my last slam dunk all-star big. You know who I really like? He does such a great job. I would love to have him on the show sometimes. I've been a huge fan forever. Is Tim Legler. And I was listening to Tim Legler. He's got a great podcast with our friend Adam Maris. And they were talking about the All-Stars. And he said, if so-and-so was better or so-and-so was healthy, that Jaren Jackson Jr. would be the first All-Star reserve I kick off my team. And I took my phone and I slammed it into the cement when I heard that. Because I'm like, have you seen Jaren Jackson Jr. play lately? The man is a monster.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a machine. You know what I love about what is happening with Jaren this season and why I think he's just slam dunk with easy All-Star. The question is, how good is he beyond that? The question is not whether he's on the All-Star team. Is he's having these games offensively where first of all, Memphis is a machine. They play like the Terminator. It doesn't matter what you cut their legs off, they keep coming after you. They're down by 20, they keep coming after you. You stop Morant, they put Pippen and Laravia in the game, and never stops. Jaren Jackson Jr. is absolutely taking it to every single top big man in the NBA when they play. He is absolutely destroying them. It doesn't Celtics, Giannis, it doesn't matter who it is. He is taking it right into their throats every night. His touch around the basket's incredible. In the last month, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe this. Our little Jaren has grown up. Last month, 28 points per 75 on plus 3% true shooting. The Grizzlies are outscoring teams by 9 points per 100 when he plays, plus 10 on off. Yeah.
I think what's really cool is if you're box score watching and you look and you're like, oh, it basically looks the same as last year. Like, what's so special? Last year, he had to do so much. Like, the fact that he's actually scoring more than last year while Ja is playing and while, they basically have full roster ready to go is, to me, incredible that he's able to slip in with that sort of skill set. Like, he took away what he needs to do to fit into a high-level offense. He's capitalizing on it. And something you brought up earlier, that he plays with so much force, Ben. Like, if you defend Jaren Jackson drives throughout an entire game, you're going to be bruised by the end of it. He goes straight at you. He wants to go for like that little push shot 5 feet away, 7 feet away or something like that. He's not the best like short mid-range scorer in the NBA, but he's good enough that like he's going to get there basically whenever he wants, and he's going to make a fair amount of them. The passing leaves a bit to be desired, but like if he was a better passer, he'd just be an all NBA player, right? He would straight up just be an all NBA player. And defensively, obviously, like we've talked about, maybe we don't consider him a defensive player of the year, but that doesn't mean he's not a very good defensive player.
In the Kawhi Leonard All-Star category, I have Joel Embiid, so who will just be sidelined as an injured reserve, because I have no idea what to do with him, because I as we've talked about, unfortunately, his knee does potentially seem to be degenerative. I have no idea what you can get going forward from Embiid. Obviously, sometimes when he plays, he's phenomenal. He's not going to be the insane all-time peak that he was at last year before all these injuries caught up with him. So I don't know what to do with him. Let's see. Sub All-Star. Yeah, you want to do the purple first? I have two purple. I have four purple players.
Who are the purples?
Yeah, I have Rudy Gobert, Alperen Şengün, Domantas Sabonis, and Kristaps Porzingis in the purple.
Did you say Jarrett Allen in there?
No, because he's not in my purple. He is a solid Sub All-Star. Yeah.
So you would have Rudy Gobert above Jarrett Allen.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've seen the defensive gap between Rudy Gobert and Jarrett Allen.
Do you think that gap will still be there in the playoffs?
Yeah, it just won't be as big. Yeah.
Okay. That's fair.
Fair.
I think the gap offensively is bigger, though. I think Jarrett Allen is a much better offensive player than Rudy Gobert is.
See, in the playoffs, I feel like he's a better offensive player, but it's not much better anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. I also have Bam Adebayo as a Sub All-Star. How do you feel about that?
I have okay. We're almost an hour and a half in. I'm going to ask you this question. No one else is listening. Everyone's started off already. If you straight up traded Bam Adebayo for Isaiah Hartenstein, are we sure the Thunder would be better?
The Thunder?
Mm-hmm.
The Oklahoma City Thunder? No, I'm not sure they would be better. No.
Yeah.
Would you like to allow me to continue making my Sub All-Star team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I think Isaiah Hartenstein and Ivica Zubac should really be considered as Sub All-Stars. What do you think?
There was a play against the Blazers where Chris Murray drove and Bam Adebayo was at the rim and he stepped out of the way.
I guess what I'm really asking is, do we no longer think Bam is a Sub All-Star? That's what I'm asking.
I'm getting real nerd. I'm getting calls, Ben. My people are deeply concerned. Like deeply concerned about this one, Ben. I just don't know. I don't know how to handle anything in Miami. It seems like Tyler Hero's thriving. Like he's having the best season of his career right now. I just don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, Ben.
Okay. We're an hour and a half in. I've lost all the oxygen in my brain. I've remembered that we have a couple more bigs to discuss, and then we'll recap the final teams. Chet Holmgren, I don't know what to do with him either because he's injured as well, and he's probably an all-star. If I had to pick, I would say Chet Holmgren's an all-star. But we have to address briefly, I don't want to be negative today, Cody, but briefly, we have to address that Paolo Banchero started the season really well, and he's just been a disaster since. And I don't really think we need to say anything else if anyone's seen the Magic lately.
It's really concerning.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We don't have to do a whole thing about it. We just have to acknowledge his existence in case the ship is righted. And people will look back and they say, what happened with Paolo? Why wasn't it? That's it. We just have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, we're keeping an eye on it.
Okay.
So I was approached on the street. Someone walked up and said, keep an eye on Bam. Not Bam. I still am on Bam Island here. Keep an eye on Paolo. So that's what we're going to do, Ben.
I mean, it's possible the Mavericks will acquire him this week. Not sure.
They could have just called a couple more teams, Ben. Just two more.
I think also in this range for me is Draymond Green, although the age is becoming a problem. I have to give a shout out to Cody's guy, Goga Patatse here, because I mean, he's also really good. Like he's good. He's just a good player. We've talked about Lauri Markkanen last year. Shout out to Naz Reid, Miles Turner. These are all good players playing pretty well. Julius Randle. I'm only going to pick a couple of these guys.
Okay.
We don't need to rehash the Sabonis conversation. We have a question or a comment in the audience about Sabonis. The short of it, we discussed extensively last year, is that Sabonis is a regular season all-star, I think, to both of us, clearly. But there are things in the playoffs where there are other players I prefer over him, and they kind of push his value kind of to the other side of the line for me because of some of his limitations.
I'll make one comment. He's shooting like 46% from three this year. He's upped his volume a bit. He is not being defended like he shoots 46% from three. And that is a number that I don't necessarily think impacts much when we go into a playoff series.
Yeah, but if he can also, I mean, he is 29 or 28. If he can also expand parts of his game, whether it's the 3-point shooting or whether it's his defense, then I do think you're talking about someone who you can make a good argument for being an all-star when you look at overall end of the season playoff value. That's the nature of being a sub all-star when you're on this side of the conversation. When you're in the purple zone, Cody, you can make the argument that he's an all-star. When you're in the yellow zone, you're trying to make the argument that he's a sub all-star. So I'm gonna go Jared Allen, Rudy Gobert. You know who's another tricky one here is Şengün, Alperen Şengün from the Rockets. Feels like a sub all-star to me.
Yeah. I'll give that to you.
Okay. No pushback, nothing to discuss in detail.
No. I think, I don't know. The scoring punch, like I think people imagine he's a better scorer than he is just because of his play style, right? Like I think if you lump him in with like the Sabonis type of play, Sabonis just, I feel like it's more physical, scores a little bit better, has a little bit more moves down there. I think Sabonis is probably a better passer. It just feels like Sabonis is just a better version offensively than Şengün. Şengün's a better defender. I'll give you that. Like I think he ups his game there a little bit more. But again, he's surrounded by such a good defensive cast. So, yeah, I'm fine with where you put him.
So how do you feel about Bam? That's the final thing I want to get here.
I think we got a sub all-star him. I do.
Okay. I have him as a sub all-star. I'm just waiting to hear the argument that he's declined even more. Yeah.
I think offensively there are some deep concerns, and I think even defensively, he just does not strike me as a guy that's a genuine defensive player of the year candidate, which people have talked about him in the past. I think in general, I have been lower on Bam for years now than most everyone. So if he's shifting down, I'm probably too low on him at this point. So I think I'm course correcting and just saying, give him the sub all-star nod.
Okay, here we go. Recapping the teams. Do you have any more questions to pepper you with here about? I'm going to go Zubats in and Isaiah Hartenstein.
Did you say Kristaps Porzingis?
I did, as a sub all-star.
Oh, I missed him. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the bigs, all-stars, Victor Wembanyama, Evan Mobley, Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson Jr., Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl Anthony Towns, Nikola Jokic, injury reserve category on the side for Joel Embiid and Chet Holmgren. Then we get to the sub all-stars for the bigs. Jared Allen, Bam Adebayo, Rudy Gobert, Alperen Şengün, Domantas Sabonis, Kristaps Porzingis, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Ivica Zubats. Those are my bigs.
Okay.
Any thoughts, questions? Did I miss anything before I go to the next?
I don't think so. I think it sounds right.
Okay. Next is the smalls. We had about 1,000 smalls that we looked at. And with the smalls, you want to do smalls or you want to do wings? I guess I should do smalls.
Yeah, do smalls.
Okay. All-stars, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards, Stephen Curry, Devin Booker, Tyrese Maxey, Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, Kyrie Irving, Damian Lillard. What did we say about Trae Young? I don't remember. Did I say sub all-star?
Were we going to come back to him?
Yeah, I'm going to go sub all-star.
Okay.
Jalen Suggs, Trae Young, Fred VanVleet, Desmond Bane, Norman Powell, Tyler Hero, De'Aaron Fox. I'm sorry, I messed this up. I did because Cade Cunningham should be in the all-star group. Yes. So Kyrie Irving, Damian Lillard, Cade Cunningham. That's the end of the all-stars. Then the sub all-stars are Trae Young, Jalen Suggs, Fred VanVleet, Desmond Bane, Norman Powell, Tyler Hero, LaMelo Ball, Derek White, Tyrese Halliburton, and I'm going to go with Jamal Murray because I'm a biased homer. That's why. And who's left? The wings. Jalen Williams, Jason Tatum, LeBron James, Franz Wagner, Jaylen Brown, Kevin Durant are the all-star wings along with Pascal Siakam. And the sub-all-star wings are OG Anunoby. Kawhi Leonard is an injury reserve set aside. Jalen Johnson, Josh Hart, Scotty Barnes. And we will go with... we'll do Amen Thompson.
You are? Okay.
I don't know. It's the end of the show. It's right there. I just want to do it.
It's one of those things where I hate being swayed by public opinion, but the chat was really into them. Maybe I'm a little low on him. Maybe we should just do it, what you just did.
Or maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should leave him out so it reflects that we're not as high as everyone else on Amen. I love the potential. I also love watching Amen. He's one of my favorite players to watch. But maybe I leave him out. I leave him out because if I'm going to leave Denny out, I have to use the same logic
With Lash
on Amen. Yeah.
Whew.
That's it. That's the 2025 Thinking Basketball 7th Annual Sub All-Stars.
How many players is that?
I don't know.
It's a lot.
Find out later. If I went over by a lot of players, then I'm going to come back and next year, Cody, we might have like 40. Cody and I were discussing this right before the show. There's so many good players now. We might have a division of this category and only the really good ones make it in. So instead of like 60 players being sub all-stars next year, it'll be like 41 will make the cutoff.
Like a tight cutoff. Like we can only have this many.
Yeah, we come full circle. Yeah.
That might be actually what we have to do. I think that would make for some more interesting, because at a certain point we're like, I don't know, do we let them in? We're like, sure, none of it matters. But if we actually had to have like, there's 41.
Yeah, 42.
Somebody remind us this in like a year.
Yeah. That's it for this one. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. Hope you enjoyed it and that you are, of course, having... Wait a second. What? I need to do...
You didn't do the regular closeout.
Wait a second. I need to say like Patreon. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. We have a ton of extras and we have the Gamer series for deluxe super video deluxe members on Patreon. You can sign up on YouTube and get all our extra member content as well over there if you just want video. I think we're going to have an extra on Amen and his offense coming up. So maybe I change my mind after I do that. Now I can say thanks for listening. And of course, I hope you're having a great day.